Okay, so we stopped where we have entered all our entries into our creditors journal and to our creditors allowance journal. Now we're going to look at how we're going to post this to the general ledger, right? So our T accounts and how it has happened. So yesterday we did do it in the video for the creditors journal, but I'm just repeating it so we can revise a bit. So this is my creditors journal. I've just brought it from the textbook down. My creditors control amount is saying 2590. Then I've got trading stock for 400, equipment as 1200 and stationery 800 and repairs as 190. So if you remember, we're going to say what are we debiting and what are we crediting. Our creditors control got credited with the amount of the 2590, which is actually a liability, right? So it increases on the credit side, right? So we've increased it on the credit side, and that's a liability. Then this 2590 was split up into these amounts here. So if we add these amounts together, these amounts, if you cross total them, you need to come to 2590. So I've debited my trading stock with 400, I've debited my equipment with 1200, I've debited my stationery with 800, and I've debited my repairs with 190, and the account that gets credited is the creditors control account. So this amount, obviously here, it needs to agree to the creditors list total, right? And we'll go through that a bit later. So let's do now the creditors allowance journal, right? So what we have now is the totals. I've written the totals here. Just concentrate on this bottom part here. So I've got the totals for the creditors allowance journal here, right? So let's see what's happening here now. We've got the creditors allowance journal, okay? My total in my creditors control was 190, which was made up of 40 Rand of trading stock and 150 Rand of stationery. So if I cross total it, you can see I'm coming to 190. Okay, so remember, this is for returns or any claims on the invoices, for discounts, etc., right? So we did the transactions. Now we just want to see how we're posting to the ledger. So if you look at this one here, right, the creditors control, I've brought the amounts down from my creditors creditors journal here, which we had a credit of 2590 in creditors control. Stationery had 800 and trading stock had 800. So if you just want to compare it there, you'll see here that's from the creditors journal. That credit there, and trading stock has an amount of 400 and stationery has an amount of 800. And now I'm going to post my creditors allowance journal. So what am I going to do now is my creditors control is going to get debited with the 190. So I'm going to put the 190 Rand here. So we'll do the full transactions a bit later on, and you can write down all the details in your homework. But I'm debiting my creditors control account. Look, creditors control is a liability. It increases from the credit side. So this came out from my creditors journal. How much do I owe all the creditors, and how much have I returned to the creditors? So 190 Rand has to make my creditors control amount less. If we close off that account there, we will get 2590 minus the 190, which is 2400 Rand. Okay, so 2400 Rand will be the amount that is actually, if you're closing off this account, that is sitting in the creditors control now, right? So this 190 Rand here, we've credited our creditors control. And what do we have to debit? We're going to, we've debited our creditors control with the 190 Rand. Now we are doing a credit for 40 Rand here for stationery, and we are doing a credit for 150 Rand for, the 40 Rand was for the trading stock and the 150 Rand is for the stationery. So what is happening here? If we're minusing 40 Rand from the 400 Rand on our trading stock account, 360 would be the amount that we have actually got into our business that we are owing money for, right? So it increases on the debit side when we bring it in from the creditors journal. We've credited the creditor, we debited the trading stock, but now it's the reverse entry where we have debited the creditors control and now we are crediting the trading stock because this stock here has been returned. It went back, it went out of our business, so we returned it, so we no longer have it, we only have 360 Rand. Same thing with the stationery. What was the transaction for the stationery there? Also unsuitable stationery, we returned it, so this amount here has to be returned. Okay, so you can see this is an expense. It's increases on the debit side, it decreases on the credit side. So what I have done from here, this amount came from my creditors journal, where I credited my creditor and I debited my stationery. So I had bought 800 Rand worth of stationery, it came into my business, but now the 150 Rand went out of my business. I'm crediting my stationery account, and so how much would I have left over would be the 650 Rand of actual stationery that I have now, right? So we're taking into account the returns, and those returns are all coming from your creditors allowance journal. Remember when we did cash transactions, right? So when you have a cash transaction, instead of creditors control here, you would have if you're buying stock, right? For example, let's do stock. We would say debit our trading stock with this 400 Rand, and we would credit bank with the 400 Rand. But now I'm not crediting my bank any longer with the 400 Rand. I'm crediting my creditors control account with this 400 Rand. And why is that so? Because I haven't yet paid the money. Then we're going to do the payments a bit later. So the creditors control is getting credited with that 400 Rand. So this account is changing into creditors control. It creates a liability because the money is still owed. Okay, so now that's completed our creditors allowance journal. Now I just want to go through the creditors ledger here for you, right? So if you look at your general ledger here, I've done it in T accounts, right? So you can see here what has happened to the equipment. Okay, from the creditors control, they have debited. We bought equipment in the creditors journal for 1200 Rand on credit. There was no returns or anything, so that's why there's no entry here on the credit side. Then the trading stock, we've done a T account. From the creditors journal, we brought down 400 Rand and we returned the 40 Rand. There's your return, and it's coming from the creditors allowance journal, right? And your creditors control account, that was the amount from your creditors journal in our T account, and we have total returns of 190 Rand, which came from your creditors allowance journal, right? So here we would write actually you can put in total allowances or total returns. We don't use sundry accounts, it doesn't make sense, right? Okay, so nominal account section here, the repairs, we got repairs on credit for 190 Rand. There was no complaints, or you didn't claim any discount or anything, so it stays the same. Stationery, we bought stationery on credit, so it was 800 Rand got debited to the stationery account, and this is the amount that you've returned. So we are decreasing the stationery on this side here, we are increasing the stationery on that side there. For repairs, it's an expense, we decrease on that side, we increase on the debit side. Creditors control, we have a liability, so we are increasing on the credit side and we are decreasing on the debit side. A trading stock is an asset, so when we buy trading stock, we put it onto the debit side. When we return trading stock, we decrease it on the credit side. Equipment also is an asset, so it increases on the debit side, decreases on the credit side. So now we need to do the creditors ledger, which is very similar to the debtors ledger, but we need to spot the difference here. Creditors ledger of Sonia's Cafe, so it's done per creditor. Can you see the name of the creditor there? So now the creditors ledger is useful because it's telling you how much you're owing that particular person, so you need to go pay that person in time, right? So on the 20th of January, they've just given you as an example, if there was a balance brought down, this example had 0. But if the beginning of the question they told you that Sparky Limited has an outstanding balance of 1,000 Rand, you would put that 1,000 Rand in your balance there, right? Same how we did the debtors ledger. Then on the 9th, okay, from your transactions, that invoice X4 Where did we get it from? From our Creditors Journal, right? The folio is telling you to go back and check where did you get the transaction from. So we've posted it in the Creditors Journal. Now we're posting it into our Creditors Ledger. So now are we debiting or are we crediting this creditor? We are crediting this creditor. So what you need to notice here is that this is a liability. And if you remember when we did debtors ledger, it's the reverse way. So to increase the liability, you would credit it. So when you're buying on credit and you're owing them money and you see an invoice, you're going to credit it, right? In the beginning, you can just do it from memory, but please, I told you guys, don't learn anything off by heart. Please understand why you are crediting it, right? So we're owing them money, we're increasing our liability. So we take 400 Rand and our balance here, example, if that was 1,000 Rand, our balance would become 1,400 Rand. You take that balance, you're adding it to there, and you go there and you put 1,400 Rand. Now look at the debit note, right? So on the 10th, we have a debit note J9. Where did it come from? It came from our Creditors Allowance Journal now. And am I going to debit or credit my creditor? I want to debit my creditor. Why? Because I want to decrease my creditor. I am not owing them that 40 Rand anymore for this debit note here. Right, so for Sparky, that was a return for trading stock, right? So this trading stock went back to them. I don't want to pay them for it. So this 40 Rand, I want to minus it from there. So when I have this 400 Rand here, now this balance, you will take the balance minus the 40 Rand and come to your final balance. So this balance here is showing us at the end of this month, January, how much am I owing Sparky and Co, right? I'm not going through all the creditors ledgers. It's the same. The examples are there. You can read through this entire example. It's very nice. It's task 5.7 where they have done the Creditors Journal, the Creditors Allowance Journal, the ledger, the general ledger, and the Creditors Ledger for you. You'll see Macro Supplies. Read through it and see what we have credited and what we have debited. Remember that it gets a plus here and a minus there, and a plus here and a minus there, and you can just read through all that. I've gone through everything. Your homework for today would be task 5.8. What is task 5.8 telling you to do? Right? Record the transactions in the Creditors Journal and the Creditors Allowance Journal. For September, use your own document numbers. Okay, so you just have to use your discretion. For these ones here, we're going to have invoices, and for the Creditors Allowance Journal, you can make debit notes. Provide the following additional columns in both journals: trading stock, equipment, and stationery. So just check your exercise book. If they have put in the columns or not, that means the Creditors Journal and the Creditors Allowance Journal must have these columns here. Then you're going to post to the ledger and you're going to extract the creditors list. And what you need to watch out for is that the creditors list and the creditors control account must be matching, right? Okay, so they've given you now information. Creditors list on the 31st of August 20.8. Now this is where they didn't have it in the example, right? We're doing September, so these are opening balances for 1st of September. So this Young Fuel CC, we are owing them 12,450 at the beginning of the year. So if you go, for example, to that balance brought down there, you would put it down, and then that would be the balance that you are owing that person. Then you put in their transactions, you will credit the, all from the Creditors Journal, you would debit all the Creditors Allowance Journal, and then you work out the totals. They've left out a creditors control balance at the beginning of the year here. So what you need to do is work backwards, put in all your information, and then solve that problem there, right? So then here's your transactions. Okay, these are all the transactions for September. So go through it and then look for the source documents, right? And decide whether you're going to put it into the Creditors Journal or you're going to put it into the Creditors Allowance Journal. Then you draw up your ledger and your creditors list. Jazakallah.